Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a question that's really puzzled humanity forever, this duality of our nature. You, our listener, wanted to really get to grips with why we're capable of both, amazing kindness and also terrible cruelty, and do it efficiently.
Right. Get the knowledge fast and deep.
Exactly. So we've plunged into a stack of fascinating research for you, especially drawing from this really comprehensive work called AI Insights into Human Coexistence and Conflict.
Yeah, that one. It pulls together ideas from, well, all over the place, doesn't it?
It really does.
Right.
Feels like how we evolved, our genes, our brains, philosophy, psychology, history, culture.
Even game theory and complex systems theory. It's quite the mix.
It is.
So our mission today really is to try and understand the roots of this inherent capacity for both good and bad within all of us. We want to explore how these seemingly opposite tendencies show up, in our lives and in our societies, and maybe even why they exist in the first place.
And maybe uncover a few surprises along the way.
Hopefully. Get ready for some perspectives that might just challenge how you think about it.
Okay, so let's start with this core idea, this duality.
Yeah.
It's more than just saying we do good things and sometimes bad things, right?
Right, exactly. It's deeper than that. It's about these fundamental drives, these tendencies within us.
Yeah.
So on one side, you've got the urge towards pro-social behavior, things like cooperation, helping others, feeling empathy, all the good stuff, basically. And then on the other side, you have these tendencies for antisocial behavior, selfishness, aggression, maybe even malice, wanting to harm others.
And what's striking is it's not just about our actions or doing, but it's these really deep-seated ways of thinking and feeling, almost part of the package of being human.
Precisely. And this internal back and forth, it creates real tension. You feel it inside yourself sometimes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But it's also there in society as a whole. And it's a theme we see played out constantly in stories, in art.
Like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a classic way of picturing it.
Exactly. It's such a powerful illustration of grappling with these opposing forces within us, the socially acceptable side versus those darker impulses we try to hide.
It really is. And
yeah.
I mean, this isn't a new idea, is it? People have been thinking about this for ages.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned Carl Jung earlier. He had some really profound things to say about this.
The shadow self, right?
Yeah, the shadow, that unconscious part of ourselves, the bits we often don't want to acknowledge. And he had that quote. What was it?
Every good quality has its bad side, and nothing that is good can come into the world without directly producing a corresponding evil. Pretty intense.
It is intense, but it highlights something crucial. This duality isn't like a modern glitch or just a flaw in our society. It seems to be a fundamental aspect of being human, complex beings. And its influence is everywhere, across cultures, throughout history. It shapes everything from our personal development to global politics, how societies are set up, our laws, our ethics.
Even what we think of as a good quality of life, it's baked in. Sort of. So where do these conflicting tendencies actually come from? I mean, is it all about how we're raised, our environment, or is there something, more fundamental, maybe biological?
Well, the evidence strongly suggests it has deep roots in our biology, shaped by evolution over, vast stretches of time.
Okay.
Evolutionary psychology offers some really compelling ways to think about how both our cooperative instincts and our competitive ones could have actually given our ancestors an edge, helped them survive and reproduce.
Okay, that makes sense for competition, maybe.
Yeah.
But how does evolution explain something like altruism? Helping someone else, especially if it costs you something. In a survival of the fittest world, that seems counterintuitive.
It does seem that way at first glance, yeah. Which is why several key theories have popped up to explain it. One big one is kin selection.
Kin selection.
Yeah.
Helping your relative.
Exactly. W.D. Hamilton proposed this. The idea is we might be altruistic towards our relatives because they share our genes. So even if helping my brother costs me something...
You're still helping your own genes survive, just indirectly.
Precisely. He even came up with a formula for it, RBC.
RBC. Okay, break that down.
So R is how closely related you are, like 0.5 for a sibling. B is the benefit the other person gets from your help, and C is the cost to you.
Right.
The rule basically says altruism is more likely if the benefit to them, weighted by how related you are, is bigger than your cost.
Okay, that makes sense for family. What about helping non-relatives?
That's where reciprocal altruism comes in, Robert Triver's idea. It's about cooperation between unrelated individuals.
The you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing.
Pretty much. The key is the expectation that the favor will be returned later. This needs, well, certain conditions.
Like seeing the person again.
Right, repeated interactions. And you need to be able to recognize people and, crucially, spot the cheaters, those who take help but don't give it back. And emotions probably evolved to help manage this. Things like gratitude, guilt, trust, even moral outrage when someone cheats the system.
Like the tit-for-tat strategy in game theory. Start by cooperating, then do whatever the other person did last time.
Exactly. A simple but effective model of that kind of reciprocal cooperation.
But what about helping, say, complete strangers, people you might never meet again? How does that fit?
Good question. That could be where theories like indirect reciprocity come in. Helping someone, even a stranger, can boost your reputation.
So others see you being helpful, and they're more likely to help you down the line.
Exactly. It's like building social capital, showing you're a good cooperator. Then there's group selection. The idea that groups with more cooperative members might outcompete groups full of selfish individuals.
Controversial, that one, isn't it? Group selection.
It has been, yeah, though it's gained more traction recently. And then there's parochial altruism. That's a really interesting, maybe slightly unsettling idea.
Go on.
It suggests that in environments with a lot of conflict between groups, a tendency to be really altruistic towards your own group members, your in-group, might have evolved alongside hostility or aggression towards outgroups.
Wow. So in-group love and out-group hate could be linked. Two sides of the same evolutionary coin. That's sobering.
It is. It really highlights the complexities. And there are other factors, too, like mutualism, where cooperation benefits everyone immediately, and niche construction.
Niche construction.
That's the idea that humans actively shape their environments. Think building shelters, farming. And these environments we create then influence which traits get favored by evolution, including cooperative ones. Language, for example, is a huge enabler of complex cooperation.
Right, communication.
But of course, alongside all this cooperation, competition and aggression have also been advantageous in certain situations, competing for resources, mates, status.
So it sounds like evolution gave us this whole toolkit, a range of behaviors, both good and bad, as we call them. And which tool gets used depends a lot on the context.
That's a good way to put it.
What about our genes specifically? You mentioned genetics earlier. Do they play a direct role in this duality?
Oh, absolutely. Research in behavior genetics, twin studies, adoption studies, consistently shows that both antisocial behaviors like aggression and pro-social behaviors like empathy have a pretty significant heritable component.
How significant? Like ballpark?
Often studies estimate somewhere around 40 to 50% of the variation we see between people in these traits could be down to genetic differences. So yeah, our genes definitely contribute to our individual leanings.
Wow. Okay, 40, 50%. That's substantial. Are there like specific genes involved? The aggression gene or the empathy gene?
Well, it's not quite that simple, unfortunately. It's much more complex. But researchers have identified several gene systems that seem to play a role.
Such as?
For example, genes involved with monoamine neurotransmitters, think serotonin, dopamine, those brain chemicals affecting mood, impulse control, reward, and the enzymes that regulate them, like MAOA or COMT. Variations in these have been linked to differences in aggression and impulsivity. Then you have genes related to the oxytocin and vasopressin systems. Those are hormones really important for social bonding, trust, empathy. Variations there might influence how prone someone is to pro-social behavior.
So multiple systems interacting, not just one gene doing one thing.
Exactly. And crucially, genes don't operate in a vacuum. It's always about the interaction with the environment. Gene-environment interactions, or GXE.
Right. Can you give an example?
Sure. There's a well-known finding regarding a variant of the MAOA gene, the so-called warrior gene, though that's a bit simplistic. Individuals with the low-activity version might be at higher risk for antisocial behavior, but primarily if they also experience significant childhood maltreatment.
So the gene creates a predisposition, but the environment kind of pulls the trigger.
Sort of, yeah. And importantly, a supportive, nurturing environment can often buffer those genetic risks. It's this dynamic interplay.
Fascinating.
And interestingly, some studies suggest that genetic influence on pro-social behavior seems to get stronger as we age, while the influence of the shared family environment, like parenting style, decreases.
Really? Why would that be?
One idea is that as we get older, we have more freedom to choose our own environments, our friends, our activities, and we tend to choose ones that fit with our underlying genetic inclinations. Active gene-environment correlation, it's called.
We sort of build our own niche, reinforcing our nature. That makes sense. There was also a term in our notes, motivated genetic attributions. What's that about?
Ah, yeah. That's a subtle psychological bias. People tend to think that good behaviors, pro-social ones, are more due to someone's genes.
Then bad behaviors.
Exactly, more than antisocial ones. Why? Well, maybe we just want to believe human nature is fundamentally good.
Or maybe we want to believe human nature is fundamentally good.
Or maybe we want to hold people responsible for bad actions, see them as choices, not just biology.
That's another possibility, yeah. Preserving the idea of free will for negative stuff while seeing good deeds as more innate. Okay, so biology gives us this foundation, this potential for both sides. What's actually happening in the brain when we're being cooperative versus selfish or empathetic versus aggressive?
Yeah, neuroscience has mapped out networks often called the social brain or the moral brain. Key regions are involved here.
Like the prefrontal cortex.
Sure.
That's involved in decision-making, right?
Absolutely, especially parts like the VMPFC, OFC, DLPFC. They're crucial for executive functions planning, impulse control, integrating emotions, and rational thought, making moral judgments. Damage or dysfunction there often leads to impaired social behavior.
Okay. What else?
The amygdala is huge. It processes emotions, especially fear and threat, but it's also involved in learning, aggression, and empathy. Its function can be atypical in conditions like psychopathy.
Right.
Then you've got the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC involved in detecting errors, monitoring conflict, regulating emotions. The insula processes internal body states, gut feelings, but also disgust, pain, and that feeling what others feel, kind of effective empathy.
Effective empathy.
Yeah.
As opposed to...
Cognitive empathy. That's more about understanding someone else's perspective, their thoughts and intentions. That relies more on areas like the temporal parietal junction, the TPJ. It's key for theory of mind.
Theory of mind, knowing others have minds like ours, basically.
Exactly. And maybe the mirror neuron system plays a role too in understanding actions, imitation, maybe empathy as well, though that's still debated a bit.
It sounds like a really complex network, all these regions interacting. So for empathy specifically.
Well, as we said, there's cognitive empathy, understanding, and effective empathy, feeling. Different circuits are more involved in each. Prefrontal cortex and TPJ, maybe more for cognitive. Insula and cingulate, more for effective. And yeah, if these circuits are impaired, you often see reduced pro-social behavior.
Okay.
And interestingly, some research hints at an overlap between brain circuits for empathy and those for violence.
Really? That's surprising. How so?
It's complex, but it might suggest some shared basic mechanisms for intense social engagement or response that can manifest in very different, even opposite ways, depending on other factors.
Wow. Okay. And what about the neurobiology of aggression or antisocial behavior?
That also involves a network, including the amygdala, the hypothalamus, which regulates basic drives, and the prefrontal cortex again. Often in individuals with persistent antisocial patterns, you see reduced activity in those prefrontal control regions.
Less impulse control.
Potentially, yes. And altered reactivity in the amygdala. So biology, genes, brain structures, they provide the foundation, the potential.
But how it all plays out depends hugely on environment, learning, social context.
Exactly. And even traits like aggression aren't inherently bad from a purely biological survival perspective. They can be adaptive in certain contexts, makes simple moral judgments tricky.
Right. So we've got this biological basis. But what about the thinkers, the philosophers and psychologists who've wrestled with this duality for ages? How did they frame it?
Oh, this has been the central debate in philosophy for centuries. You go back to Plato, he saw the rational soul battling bodily desires. Aristotle emphasized reason too, but saw our nature as something to be developed, fulfilled.
And then you get those really stark contrasts later on, like Hobbes versus Rousseau.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hobbes, famously pessimistic, he thought life without a strong ruler would be a war of all against all, driven by self-interest. Society is basically there to keep our nasty impulses in check.
Whereas Rousseau was the opposite.
Pretty much. He thought humans are naturally good, compassionate even, and it's society that corrupts us. The noble savage idea, though, may be oversimplified.
So fundamentally selfish versus fundamentally good.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Huge. And you had others, like Hume, emphasizing sympathy and emotion as the basis of morality, not just cold reason. Then Darwin comes along and throws evolution into the mix.
Suggesting our nature isn't fixed, but evolved.
Right. And many modern philosophers lean towards that, less of a fixed human nature, more emphasis on adaptability, culture shaping us.
It's amazing how those old debates still echo today, even if we don't always realize it. What about psychology? How has that field tackled duality?
Psychology offers lots of angles. Kohlberg's stages of moral development, for instance. That maps how our moral reasoning can develop, from pure self-interest
To following rules.
to potentially grasping abstract ethical principles. But Kohlberg himself knew there's often a big gap between how we reason and how we act.
The reasoning-action gap.
Then there's self-determination theory, SDT, really influential.
That's the one about basic needs, autonomy, competence.
And relatedness.
Yeah,
exactly. SDT argues that when those needs feeling in control, effective, connected are met, we thrive. We're more intrinsically motivated, more pro-social. When they're thwarted, well, that can lead to negative outcomes, less well-being, maybe more antisocial tendencies.
Makes sense. And Jung's shadow we mentioned earlier.
Right. That emphasizes integrating the unconscious, less desirable parts of ourselves for psychological wholeness, not denying them, but acknowledging them.
And Bandura's moral disengagement. How does that fit?
Bandura looked at how we can do harmful things without feeling bad about it. The cognitive tricks we play on ourselves.
Like blaming the victim or using euphemisms.
Or diffusing responsibility, minimizing the harm. All ways to switch off our moral compass temporarily. It helps explain how ordinary people can sometimes participate in harmful actions.
So these qualities, the good and the bad, how do they actually develop as individuals? Is it just nature versus nurture, flipping a coin?
Definitely not that simple. It's this constant, intricate dance between our genes and our experiences right from the start.
Early life must be critical.
Hugely. The quality of parenting, attachment security, exposure to trauma or neglect, all these things interact with our underlying predispositions to shape our development. Personality traits play a role too. Things like conscientiousness or agreeableness from the Big Five model, or traits like harm avoidance.
And this internal tension, this duality within us, it affects our well-being, presumably.
Absolutely. It fuels things like guilt and anxiety when our actions clash with our values, but also satisfaction and purpose when they align. It influences our decisions, constantly weighing self-interest against others' needs. And it's central to relationships, trust, betrayal, forgiveness, empathy. It's all tied up in navigating this duality in ourselves and others.
And this doesn't just stay inside us, right? It scales up.
It absolutely scales up. This individual duality shapes our interactions, our communities, our whole societies. It affects social cohesion, how well we stick together. It drives the formation of social structures, laws, governments, economic systems are, in part, attempts to manage these competing human tendencies.
Like managing cooperation versus free riding in a group.
Exactly. How do groups ensure cooperation when there's always a temptation for some to benefit without contributing? And remember, parochial altruism, that potential link between strong in-group loyalty and out-group hostility, that plays out on a societal level too, sadly.
So given this is inherent, how do societies actually try to, manage it? Encourage the good, discourage the bad?
Societies have developed all sorts of mechanisms. You've got formal systems, laws, police, courts, prisons. They aim to define unacceptable behavior and impose consequences, hoping for deterrence, retribution, maybe rehabilitation. Then you have the informal stuff, social norms, those unwritten rules about how we're supposed to act, enforced through social approval, gossip, reputation, sometimes ostracism.
Though norms themselves aren't always good, are they?
Excellent point. Norms can perpetuate prejudice or harmful traditions. They're powerful, but not inherently moral.
What else?
Education is key, or at least it have the potential to be. Transmitting values, teaching critical thinking, fostering empathy, promoting self-regulation skills.
And interventions for people with serious antisocial behavior.
Yeah, there are various approaches, therapy, skills training, often multimodal, combining different strategies. And there's a growing focus on early intervention, trying to support kids at risk before problems become entrenched.
Which brings us to the really deep ethical questions, doesn't it? If this duality is so ingrained, how do we even define right and wrong? What about responsibility?
Exactly. It throws up huge questions about free will versus determinism. If our biology and environment shape us so strongly, how much are we truly responsible for our actions? And how do we design systems of justice that are fair and effective, acknowledging these complexities?
Different ethical theories must approach this differently.
They do. Utilitarianism, for instance, focuses on consequences the greatest good for the greatest number. So, managing duality means creating systems that maximize overall well-being.
Okay. What about others?
Deontology, based more on duties and rules, think Kant. It emphasizes acting according to universal moral principles, regardless of outcomes. Managing duality here means upholding those duties, treating people as ends in themselves.
And virtue ethics.
That focuses on character. cultivating virtues, courage, justice, temperance, compassion. Managing duality is about fostering virtuous citizens and building character. Each framework has strengths and weaknesses, and real societies usually blend elements from all of them. There's no single easy answer.
Right. We've covered so much ground. I know you, our listener, had some specific questions when you brought up this topic. Let's maybe circle back to those directly.
Good idea.
You asked, why do humans need qualities? Good, bad, ugly. How would we answer that now?
Well, need might be the tricky word. It's perhaps less about needing them in a conscious design sense and more that this mix of traits is what emerged from evolution and development. They provided behavioral flexibility, ways to navigate complex social worlds, even the bad ones in certain contexts.
Okay. And the question, what is the quality of life, QOL, for humans?
We touched on this. It's definitely subjective, multidimensional, way beyond just money or feeling happy momentarily. It involves health, relationships, autonomy, feeling competent, having purpose, all viewed within your own cultural context and values.
Right. Another one. Do humans totally understand and acknowledge their qualities?
Almost certainly not. We talked about cognitive biases, motivated reasoning, moral disengagement, just the basic limits of self-awareness. We all have blind spots. Complete self-understanding is probably impossible.
Makes sense. Do humans depend on their qualities?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Our qualities, good, bad, ugly, are fundamental to who we are, how we interact, how others see us, our social survival and success, our identity, our mental health. We depend on them profoundly.
This ties into, why not just develop good qualities? Why the need for bad ones, too?
Again, it's partly that evolutionary legacy traits that were once useful might linger. Also, the bad might still have contextual utility sometimes, believe it or not. Development is complex. You can't easily isolate traits. And good versus bad is often relative, defined by culture and context. Plus, maybe psychological wholeness involves integrating, not eliminating, the bad parts like Dong suggested.
And is time a direct influence on human qualities?
Yes, definitely. Across different scales. Developmentally, our qualities change over our lifespan. Historically, what's valued changes over time. And evolutionarily, these qualities emerged over vast timescales. Time is woven into it.
Lastly, how can education help human qualities?
Education has huge potential. It can explicitly foster pro-social skills like empathy. It can develop moral reasoning, critical thinking about consequences and principles. It can promote self-awareness and self-regulation. And it transmits cultural norms and values, ideally, ones that help us navigate the duality constructively. It's about enabling us to manage this tension better.
We also mentioned game theory and complex systems briefly. Could you unpack those connections a bit more? How do they help understand duality?
Sure. Game theory, especially with models like the prisoner's dilemma, shows the tension between individual self-interest and collective benefit. It demonstrates mathematically how cooperation can emerge, especially with repeated interactions and strategies like reciprocity, tit for tat.
Yeah.
It models the strategic side of the duality.
And complex systems theory.
That shifts the focus. Instead of just individual traits, it looks at how patterns of behavior cooperation, conflict, emerge from the interactions of many individuals in a system. It highlights interdependence, feedback loops, nonlinearity. Things can change suddenly.
So it suggests interventions might need to target the system, not just individuals.
Exactly. It encourages thinking about leverage points, unintended consequences. It sees duality not just as an internal thing, but an emergent property of our social interactions. It cautions against simple explanations.
And the physics metaphor is balance, entropy.
Yeah, those are mostly philosophical analogies, we should stress, not literal science. But balance can evoke the idea of integrating opposing forces, like Jung's idea. And entropy can be a metaphor for the tendency towards social disorder, highlighting the constant societal effort needed to maintain cooperation and order. Useful metaphors, perhaps, but just metaphors.
Got it. So pulling all this together, this deep dive really underscores that this duality, this capacity for both good and bad, is not a bug. It's, well, a feature of being human.
It really seems that way. Fundamental. And the goal isn't necessarily to eliminate one side, which might be impossible anyway, but to understand the dynamic, the tension, and learn how to navigate it more constructively, both individually and collectively. By digging into the roots, the biology, the psychology, the history, the societal responses, we get valuable insights into ourselves and into the complex societies we build.
And maybe that very struggle, the constant wrestling with this duality, maybe that's part of what drives us. Our innovation, creativity, the search for meaning, for better ways to live together.
That's a powerful thought, isn't it? Perhaps the tension itself is generative, something to really chew on.
It definitely is. Well, thank you for guiding us through this incredibly complex but absolutely central aspect of the human condition.
My pleasure. It's endlessly fascinating.
And for you, our listener, we hope this gives you plenty to think about. Reflect on how you see these forces playing out in your own life and in the world around you. Until our next deep dive.
This is DigitView.